Hello, everybody. We are going to be reviewing the third episode of Extraordinary Attorney Woo.
Didn't even introduce what this thing was.
No, I did not. This is bonus content from the Pancake King, Life and Marriage on the Spectrum. I'm your host, Forrest, and with me is my co-host, KG.
Sup? That's
great. This whole entire bonus show is going to be an evolution of that. Every episode is going to be something new. I love it. So anyway, we are reviewing the third episode of Extraordinary Attorney Woo. Woo, Extraordinary Attorney. And so there are 16 episodes of this total, so we will be reviewing all 16 of those episodes each week. And we are now on episode 3. So actually, before we start with this, KG, since we are clearly on the penultimate episode of the show, and we got maybe 1 or 2 episodes left, what do you think is going to happen?
I think we discussed this already. We discussed that there was going to be like this anti-autistic movement that was going to like push for all autistic people to go back to asylums and stuff like that, and it was going to be a whole big thing.
Yeah, it's like, because where exactly do you go from here?
I know.
This is episode 3 out of 16, and I feel like there is...
By the way, that whole thing was a joke, by the way.
Yes. Well, I hope it stays that way. Like, I hope you don't actually end up being right in the end.
I have been right so far.
Yeah, because, man, they really raised the stakes in this episode. And we'll get into the plot, and we can talk a little bit more about why here in a bit. So why don't you go ahead, before we delve too deeply into this, why don't you go ahead and give the listeners the plot?
All right, this episode is called This is Pengsu, which for context is a penguin mascot from South Korea. Kim Jong-hoon, a young autistic man, is discovered apparently attacking his older brother, a brilliant medical student who dies intoxicated with mysteriously broken ribs. Their father, a Hambada client, asks the firm to handle Jong-hoon's defense. Youngwoo, following her father's advice on getting through to her as a child, tries to communicate with Jong-hoon through his love of Pengsu. Youngwoo and Junho find evidence that the older brother tried to hang himself, but his parents refuse to accept that he was suicidal. The prosecution uses Youngwoo's high-functioning autism to argue against the defendant's diminished capacity. Youngwoo is removed from the case, despite Myung-suk's protests, and the case is reassigned to his rival. In her office, Youngwoo appears to attempt to hang herself, but is saved by Junho. She realizes that Jong-hoon attempted to save his brother in the same way, breaking the deceased ribs in the fall and by trying to perform CPR. The charges are reduced to bodily injury, and Jong-hoon is ruled mentally incompetent. A disenchanted Youngwoo resigns from Hambada.
So that's why I was saying that this episode just feels like a penultimate episode. It feels like the end of a show or the end of a season, not
this was the
very beginning. Yeah, because all of those plot points are there. Yeah. Like, all of that stuff is there. The plot where they raise the stakes, where the client is autistic himself.
Mm-hmm. Lower functioning, by the way, just in case that wasn't
clear. Yeah. Much lower functioning compared to Woo, or I guess even us. Yeah. They used an autistic person as the client in this episode. They do a really, really good kind of crisis for Woo's character, where she realizes that as a lawyer, as an autistic lawyer, she can't help this autistic client.
Yeah, which is kind of like a big deal to her.
Yeah, it's...
because everybody was telling her, oh, you'll be able to help him. You're autistic, he's autistic, it'll be fine.
Yeah, basically realizing that despite the fact that both of them are on the autism spectrum, it's not compatible.
No.
And
because every autistic person is different.
And not only that, but they technically fail at the end. Like Woo and
Myung-suk.
Yeah, Woo and Myung-suk. Okay, Myung-suk. Okay. They kind of fail at the end.
Well, they don't
because he's still because the autistic kid is still going to end up in jail, at least for a little bit.
No.
Or was it?
They were just saying the prosecution was pushing for that, but the judge was more sympathetic, so it might not be what the prosecution wants, which was 7 years in prison.
Either way, they do kind of leave it up in the air.
Yeah.
And so his fate is kind of up in the air.
He is still charged for bodily harm, but since he's mentally incompetent, it might be a little lenient on him.
Yeah, but the problem is that we don't get a 100% assurance.
No.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we won't know. Maybe they'll show us later.
Maybe.
But we don't know now.
Right.
Either way, regardless, the outcome leaves Wu in this position where she feels like she basically can't be a capable lawyer just because she couldn't help an autistic person. Like, I can't help you, so how can I be really a useful person in the end?
Yeah.
She kind of gets this,
And
she hits this low point.
I think she also feels like her autism is more of a detriment to her ability to be a lawyer than a positive.
Yeah.
Yes, her autism allows her to view things differently, allows her to find things that no one else would think of because of her memorization of law.
Mm-hmm.
But she can't communicate well with her clients, which is an important part of being a lawyer.
And she gets this dramatic moment at the end of the episode that you see a lot in like Western media at the end of the second act, where it's like, I'm going to pack up my stuff, I'm going to give up on this, and I'm going to go who knows where.
But Junho didn't give her the gift.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
What was it? Junho.
Yeah.
Junho, like, I guess bought her a gift, and it was sort of like a gift to say sorry because a friend of his mistaken him to be volunteering for People with Disabilities Club.
Yeah, we kind of learned a little bit more background about him. The reason why he's so good at dealing with Wu is because he volunteered to help people like that.
Which is great. But it is sad, though, that someone can take one look at Wu next to him and go, oh, this is part of your volunteer responsibility, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That is sad. It's tragic.
You even like when she came up to Wu and was like, "Good, you're doing a good job," and you're like, "Oh no, she's one of those people."
Oh no, yeah.
Do you mind explaining that for people who don't understand?
Yeah. So this young woman runs into Junho and Wu on the sidewalk, and she knows him. And she just assumes in this moment that Junho is basically carrying out one of his volunteer responsibilities by walking Wu around. And she walks up to her at the end and says, "Don't give up," or something along those lines. Yeah, and I love how Wu was not oblivious to that.
Right.
She knew very clearly what was going on there, what was assumed.
Yeah.
And I loved that.
Well, I was more talking about explain to neurotypical people what you mean by, oh no, she's one of those people.
One of those people, always that type of person that... Why don't you explain it? Because I think you would be better at it.
I've never experienced someone like that, but you're the more social one.
It's the kind of person that thinks they know how this works, how helping people with disabilities work, pretending to understand the real struggle of people with disabilities. And giving these very cliche lines, these trying to give these positive vibes to people with complete cliches. I've seen these types of people myself too. Not anyone I know personally right now. But yeah, it's kind of infuriating because it shows a real lack of understanding and more just, oh, I want to appear as though I'm a virtuous one.
Yeah, you know? It's more like they want to feel better about themselves.
They want to feel better about themselves more than they really care about the other person feeling better.
It's pity more than empathy.
Absolutely. And those differences are very important. It would not be a K-drama if it wasn't for including a song with Korean subtitles at the bottom, and they break into this like dance number at one point. That's how because you would never see something like this. If the same plot was in a like Western Law and Order show, you would not have a scene like this.
You would not have a scene where they sing a child song to
this grown autistic adult.
Who's mentally like six. They said six
or 7 years old. Yeah. Whoever this actor is that did him, he did a really good job.
Yeah. You want to go into like
somehow he did not feel over the top.
Yeah.
I have literally seen people like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, without getting too personal, can you explain like a person you know who's been like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have met people like that. Not to get into specifics, when I was younger, I would also do these volunteer there was a volunteer responsibility I had where we were literally playing games with adults with disabilities. It was so interesting. I remember one experience where I would get into this full-blown conversation with a guy who was on disability. Now, I can't say whether or not he was completely autistic, but he acted kind of a lot like this autistic kid in the show. I remember he would ask me the same questions over and over and over and over again. He would ask me my name and stuff like that over and over and over again. It's like he would always forget. Sometimes he would he would just explode into this frenzy of a joy, and the people who were taking care of him had to like calm him down and get him to stop. Please don't run across the street, that sort of thing. No, and I know I knew a kid who was a lot like that. Again, can't give away names, but I knew a kid who was an awful lot like this. Even met him again a few years ago, and he's much older at this point, but the way he acted really was no different than how I remembered it 10 years back.
Yeah, well, for people who may not be watching the show, can you explain some of the symptoms?
One of the things that this autistic kid had, or what he hated, was lights, bright lights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They had to dim the lights in the room
Yeah.
when they were meeting with him and his parents.
He wore
He wore sunglasses. He also wore headphones, although I couldn't tell if it was just because he wanted to constantly listen to music or it was to kind of help with sound.
Might have been sound.
Make it less sound.
But this person you knew, did he have something like that? Was he sensitive to light?
He wasn't sensitive to something like light. It's just he was overstimulated by certain things. And he also he would watch the same things obsessively, like really obsessively. Would play the same thing over and over and over and over again, during the day, every day.
Did he hit himself at all?
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He would. He would do stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. I really liked him though. I really liked him.
Did he not really say full sentences like the kid in the show?
No. A lot of the time would blurt out phrases like this kid in the show. Would blurt out certain phrases and always had the volume really raised on his voice and stuff like that.
Can I just shout out the mom of the low functioning autistic kid? She had the patience of a saint.
I know. I feel like the show didn't really want you to like her though.
No, I mean, it's probably one of those things where they were more focused on the neurotypical kid, sort of, but she at least knew how to handle him. She never got upset with him. It's not like they were abusing him. It was just they were more focused on the neurotypical kid because he was the one that was succeeding. Because remember, in South Korea, it's a very competitive society. They have the mentality of you need to go to a good school, you need to get a good job in order to be a productive member of society. And it's obvious that their autistic son was never going to be that.
One of the most common things that K-dramas, at least the K-dramas that I've watched, does is focus on social commentary surrounding class.
Yes.
We've seen the movie Parasite.
Yes.
We've watched shows like Tomorrow.
Even Snowpiercer, which was made, it was done by a Korean director, but starred
American actors.
Yeah, Western actors.
Yeah, it was still in its veins a Western movie.
It was a Western movie with South Korean social commentary, you can say.
And so all the K-dramas that I've watched will bring up these themes at some point or another.
Well, it is a problem.
It's almost like the show will remind you, oh yeah, by the way, class is very much a problem in South Korea. I hope you remember that after the last 50 shows you've watched that has that in there. And one of the traits about the family that this autistic kid belonged to was that they were rich.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, because I'm so used to seeing this kind of commentary in these shows, at the very beginning of the episode, when we see the parents walk into their house and you just take one look at what the house looks like, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I know what part of the socioeconomic ladder they come from. And their son, who commits suicide, the kid's brother, it was Kim Jong-hoon, right?
Kim Jong-hoon. Hoon, not un. Hoon.
Okay. He was someone who was very much pressured by the responsibilities and the expectations.
What did he say? He said, the only thing I'm good at is studying, but even then I've become the worst at it.
Yeah, that was some great dialogue there.
Yeah.
What I thought was kind of weird, though, was the fact that Kim Jong-hoon, right? Kim Jong-hoon, despite having the mentality of like a 6-year-old and having all these autistic traits that definitely places him on the lower end of the spectrum, if you would call it that, despite all that, he seemed to know exactly what his brother was trying to do every time and would just freak the frick out. And I'm like, wait, how does this kid, with a 6-year-old brain or the mind of a 6-year-old even understand what his brother is doing?
I honestly think, yes, he has the mentality of a 6-year-old, but I honestly think there's also a problem of, because he has that, he can't fully express himself. I think deep down, there is a part of him that understands what's going on around him. He just can't express that. Like, even towards the end when the judge kept questioning him and all he kept saying was yes to every question.
Yes.
You could tell that he was getting emotional because he knew what had happened. He just couldn't express himself.
And that's one big trait for autistic people. Whether you're on the higher end of the spectrum or the lower end of the spectrum, you struggle to communicate your feelings or just communicate in general. Your thoughts. Yeah. That's why, for the most part, he was so quiet.
Yeah.
You know, took a taxi to go to the office just so that they can sing for him again. Because that's all he wanted.
Yeah. Or even, for example, when I worked at the daycare center, I think I've talked about this before, but for people who don't know, when I worked at the daycare center, there was a classroom that had a young autistic girl who was completely nonverbal, so she couldn't express herself at all. But because she couldn't, she would always get really frustrated. And when she got frustrated, she would get kind of violent, start hitting people or knocking stuff over and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was always just sad to see someone like that where they want to express themselves. They obviously have the thoughts in their heads. They know they want to say something, but they physically can't say anything.
Right.
I think that's something similar that was going on.
One very important part of this episode to tackle, which I will actually be tackling more fully in an episode. I don't know when it would probably already been out at this point. But in one part of the episode, this show, it tackles Hans Asperger, the guy where the term Asperger's was coined from.
One of the first people to ever study autism.
Yeah, one of the first people to ever study autism. This was actually the first time where I ever discovered that he was potentially a Nazi collaborator who sent hundreds, if not thousands, of children to basically a mental institution or a hospital run by Nazis.
Yeah.
But run by German Nazis, where they would experiment on these children and kind of analyze their mindsets themselves and decide they're not worthy of life, which...
Yeah.
That's pretty awful to hear. I kind of understand now why they ditched the Asperger's diagnosis specifically. Well, if you were to do a simple search online like I did, you would find that they ditched the term because Asperger's eventually became known as only covering like one area of the spectrum, which was the higher functioning area. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, BS. It's also because, you realize that the term Asperger comes from the name of a potential Nazi collaborator. Because at the very least, based on our research, we know that he knew what happened to those kids that he sent over there.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of the awful part of it.
But there was no evidence he was part of the party.
There's no evidence that he was part of the party, but he knew exactly what he was doing by sending those kids to the Nazis. I'm sure
there was a lot of collaborators who knew, but never considered themselves part of the party. Not that I'm defending him.
No.
But it was a difficult time for a lot of people back then.
Yeah, it sucks. Just learning that, I guess, not our origins specifically, us mutants, but the mindset, the kind of mindset that we have, what is a pretty big part of ourselves is tied back to, of course, Nazi origins. And
that show did get kind of deep when they were talking about that, because it was a monologue Wu was giving to herself, and she was like, just 80 years ago, someone like me or Jung Hoon would not have been considered worthy of life.
I think it's interesting because she does a really good job walking the fine line between living her life or going about her life without calling a whole lot of attention to her autism and actually caring about where it comes from, how she has it, and how it has an impact on her life. Yeah. I think she does a good job kind of walking the fine line in the middle without leaning too hard into either of them.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I really liked that.
Yeah, but you also told me after you watched this that was a really hard episode to watch.
It was a hard episode to watch because we kind of see all of the complications that goes into something like a trial. If someone on the autism spectrum was put on trial, of course, their place on the spectrum would be under consideration, at least in a fair society. It would be put under consideration, and it does have an impact on the results, on the verdict.
Right.
And that's really hard to watch, because you're just sitting there, you're hoping that the person, especially the one on the lower end of the spectrum, gets a fair trial in the end. And then there's the fact that Wu was technically being discriminated against for having autism herself, and thus connected to his case.
Right.
And they kind of saw her position being a part of the case, trying to help him, as like kind of cheating. If we were to put it in simply, kind of cheating in a way.
How do you think that?
If she's on the autism spectrum and so is he, I don't know.
Why should she get fairer treatment than him because she's a lawyer and he's not?
Right.
How about the idea that because I'm getting in some deep territory here, the epidemic of mass shootings that have been happening, and how a lot of those shooters they've discovered have been autistic. Name
an example of one of those shooters who turned out to have autism.
Sandy Hook was one of them.
Yeah, that was 11 years ago.
Yeah. It happened when I was in high school. That's all I remember.
Yeah.
And I think it was Sandy Hook, but I remember us talking about it in health class.
Okay, that's fair.
I can't remember if it was Sandy Hook or if another one, but basically we've gone to the topic of mass shooters, and he was listing all these different symptoms or characteristics that they had, and one of them was autism, and I'm like, oh man.
Oh no.
I hope this doesn't bite us.
Yeah.
Come back to bite us, because I don't want everybody to think we're all violent sociopaths.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a scary thing. That's why it's easy I'm not saying this to gloat or show off or anything, but it's easier for us, for people like you and me and a few other people we know, to like more or less quote unquote hide our autism, and people would really only know if you told them.
Or they might think you're quirky, but that's about it.
Yeah, we're quirky people. We're a quirky class of people.
We're the next evolution of mankind.
I sure hope to God so.
Anyway, let's also talk about the flashback with Wu's father.
I loved that, because I understood exactly what was going on in that sequence. Like, he basically he hurts his foot, lands on the floor.
He stepped on a Lego.
Yeah, he stepped on a Lego, which is every parent's nightmare, ends up on the floor, and he just starts crying because he's watching Wu, who's just minding her own business, lining up these Legos on the floor.
But he's trying to get her attention by saying, I hurt myself.
Oh no, I hurt myself.
It hurts. Come give me a hug.
Yeah, and she's just minding her own business. It's as if he's not even there. Autistic people have done that. I can say that in some cases, autistic people have had to force themselves to care when someone nearby gets hurt or someone nearby is in a pretty bad situation. We kind of see a little bit of the neurotypical person's struggle to just really connect with the other person. I loved when he said if her guardians were basically switched.
Yeah,
if he stepped out of her life and was replaced by someone else, would she even notice? Would she even notice the difference?
As long as she was getting fed.
Yeah, would it matter to her? I will tell you, I have had that exact maybe fear or something. It's like, if I die, will you even notice?
Of course I would.
Yeah, I know. But it's something that I think it's a kind of rational concern.
Sure.
When it comes to people on the autism spectrum.
I do want to point something out that happened during that scene, but right before he stepped on the Lego and he was talking to his mom. And she was basically pressuring him to get back out there and remarry. But he was like, no, I can't. I have to take care of Wu. And she was...
He quite literally can't even leave home.
Well,
you know what I mean? He can't leave home with her there.
Well, he has I think in the first episode he mentions he leaves her with a neighbor so he can work, which is a lot better than a lot of single fathers can get in South Korea.
Yeah.
Because again, as I mentioned in the first episode, being a single father in South Korea is really, really hard because you need the mom. You need the mom to be present in order to be able to get a lot of things like a birth certificate, a social security number, medical insurance, be able to go to daycare. A lot of these things that you can't have unless the mom is in the picture, and if the mom's not in the picture, well, you're basically screwed. You're basically not, your child is basically not a citizen.
I love how honest her dad was.
Mm-hmm.
When she comes in and she asks him, what's it like living with me?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, lonely.
Yeah.
You know, he's very, like, wow, like,
Yeah.
brutally honest.
Well, that's how you really get through to an autistic person.
Yeah.
By not, like...
You have to be blunt back.
Yeah.
You essentially have to be brutally honest back, because only then will they get it.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting when he says, I'll answer that question for you, or something like that, but help me cut, what was it, spinach or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, but help me cut the spinach. And she says, no, I don't want to. Yep, you are like that too.
Yep.
I was like, no, I don't want to. Okay, and that's the only reason you or someone else on the spectrum can give, and it's a reason that I've given.
Yes, but what I wanted to get to that kind of relates to autism and kind of relates to the single father problem is his mom. We don't hear what his mom says, but she obviously says something, because at first I think he was implied she was saying like, "Oh, just leave her with me, and so you can go out, to work." But he's like, "No, you can't. Your back is bad. You won't be able. You
can't even walk.
You can't even walk, basically." But then she says something. We don't hear what she says, but then he freaks out on her. He's like, "How can you say that?" And then he hangs up. Based on what I know about the problem with single fathers, which, by the way, there's a great video on YouTube by the channel Asian Boss if you're interested in that subject matter. Asian Boss is a channel that tackles a lot of topics in Asian countries that people don't really like to talk about. But anyway, I think what she was trying to get at was either send her away to a mental asylum or send her away to an orphanage. Because in the video by Asian Boss, they were interviewing a single father, and he was talking about how he had told his family he decided to take care of his daughter, and they were like, "Why would you do that? You can't do anything. Just send her away to an orphanage for a couple of years until you make enough money."
Right.
So I think that's what the mom was trying to get at, which was either send her away to an orphanage or just send her away in general.
Yeah, this episode did such a good job kind of delving in more into just the dad's struggle, raising her. And
being a single father, but also being a single father to an autistic daughter.
Yeah, and just choosing not to give up the entire time.
I know.
Like not doing as his mother suggested. Just basically sticking with her all the way up to adulthood.
Well, that's what Temple Grandin's mother did. If you ever saw that movie where everybody was saying to send her away, to send her to be institutionalized, which is a good thing she didn't, because we all know the horror stories of those types of places.
Right, absolutely, yeah. All in all, I thought this was a pretty great episode. I
just have one burning question.
What's that?
Will Junho be able to give her the gift?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we'll see. This episode really played around with the idea of their romance again. Kind of, there were like a few things, and to be fair, it was a lot of like show don't tell, type of stuff. And
I just think he was feeling bad the entire time, because he felt like you said, he felt like he needed to apologize for what his friend said, and he just felt bad because he didn't want her. I don't think he wanted her to get the impression he was doing this out of pity. Right.
And you really felt for him there when he's like trying to think of a text to send her about it, and he just gives up. He's like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Yeah. So,
do you think that they will get together, or do you think they might do
Oh, they're totally rooting for that.
They're rooting for that.
Totally
but
going for that.
Here's the problem. Autism and romance don't really go together.
Well, clearly they go together enough, because here we are, and we're like, plus autism. It's like two positives here.
Right. But what I'm getting at is that autism isn't really a high priority. I mean, romance isn't a high priority for a lot of autistic people.
No, and it doesn't seem to be a high priority even for Wu.
No.
Although, I think Wu likes him, maybe.
It's hard to tell. We can't.
It is actually hard to tell. I like the fact that they make that hard. I like that. That's really cool.
She at least likes him enough to talk to him about whales.
Yes. Or she feels comfortable enough to do it.
Yeah.
She feels like she's at home with it.
Yeah.
In fact, it was in this episode, we forgot to mention this, it was in this episode where we finally saw him actually sitting down with her having lunch, and then she just launches into it.
And he's smiling.
And he's smiling and nodding along.
And like her two coworkers are like, "Oh, she's doing it again." And the other guy's like, No, I think he likes it.
It was a great moment.
Yeah.
Great moment overall. They have such a great bond, however you define it.
I'd say it's platonic so far.
Yeah, very platonic.
Platonic / one-sided.
Yeah. But the question is, on which side is anything even happening?
Right.
I think they do a
that.
good job with the subtlety there.
Yeah.
I think the show is trying to tease you of a potential relationship more than the characters are really feeling anything.
Mm-hmm. How would you rate this episode? Because the first episode was 10 out of 10. I think second episode was
8.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
I'd probably give this one a 9 or a 9.5.
What's holding it back from a perfect 10?
I don't think anything's really holding it back. It's just, it didn't blow me away. It was just really good. This was also the first episode in the show that I think actually made me shed a tear.
Oh, what part?
During the whole thing with her dad having stepped on the Lego and crying on the floor, and she's just kind of minding her own business, because I just feel like the writers get it.
Yeah. Oh, we should also say that the moral of that whole flashback was you have to learn how to talk to an autistic person. You can't talk to them like a neurotypical person. Like
they have a particular language,
and her language was talking about law. That's how he was able to get through to her.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, otherwise, great episode overall. I really enjoyed it. I'm very curious to see how they can even possibly raise the stakes in later episodes.
Maybe it'll just be like Tomorrow, where the greatest episode was the Death Dealer episode.
Yeah, and that was smack dab in the middle of the show. And we got some really good episodes after that. None of them necessarily, though, came on the same level.
I know. I think it's because it was just so good that our expectations were set so high that the other episodes were good, but they never really were able to, like, wow us the way that episode was.
Yeah, right.
But that's a whole other story.
It is a whole other story. We really enjoyed that K-drama. It's not for everyone, but we would recommend that one, too. So, other than that, all right. Well, thank you, KG, for being a part of this discussion on this episode, and we will see how the next episode could possibly top this one or do something different. I feel like it's kind of predictable that Wu would just go back to the same office. She might even do it in the very next episode.
Who knows? It might be one of those things where, oh no, this friend is in trouble. I have to help.
Yeah, every episode is like an hour and 15 minutes or something like that.
Anything is possible.
Yeah, they can put more than enough in each episode. That's what I love about K-dramas, though, is that some of them are longer, like an hour or an hour and 15 minutes. You get more story out of it than a lot of the things from Disney Plus,
or even just regular television.
Yeah, it's true. All right. Well, on that note, we'll see you guys next week with the 4th episode of Woo. Bye.
Bye.